Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Unlock the Middle, a show where we recognize everything that's outstanding in middle-level education and beyond. My name is Dean Packard. I'm the principal of Charlton Middle School in Charlton, Massachusetts. And alongside of me, I have my good friend and co-host, Chris Starcheski, the principal of Dudley Middle School from the Mighty Titans. Tonight, we have an amazing guest, and we're not going to disappoint. Number 27 on Unlock the Middle. And we are excited to dig in because this is an area that I especially, Chris, am really excited about because I want to get better at it as we speak. So, hey, tonight's episode is live. It's going to be streamed on Periscope, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We hope that you guys can throw some comments in the comment section and, more importantly, take part in this conversation because our guest tonight is a super rock star. We can't wait to get it going. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Dean. Thanks very much for the intro to our show tonight. You know, I'm pretty fired up because our guest tonight had one of his books, and I say one of his books, has a foreword written by Yang Chao, educator from China, and I had the opportunity to meet him back in the late 2000, prior to 2010. Period. He was a distinguished lecturer at Shrewsbury Public Schools, where at the time I was an administrator, and we had a really great conversation about his book back then, Catching Up or Leading the Way. And you know, as we sit down and we shift into talking about digital literacy, we really get an opportunity to think an awful lot about. Thank you, Connie. We get to think an awful lot about the that statement that we are digital immigrants and our kids are digital natives, and how we can best build the bridge between these two sections. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with Eric here and what he's got in the way of digital leadership and digital literacy.
Well, the more the research I've done on Eric and what he's completed, going from being a teacher, a coach, like we all started off in that position, then into the leadership role and really embracing digital leadership to really build his brand. That has got me, I'm just shaking my head saying this is fantastic, because not only is it a great thing to do to build that brand and sell it out there, but more importantly, you're telling your story, you're shifting forward, you're changing mindsets. And this is what innovative thought processes do to schools when we start thinking about changing them. We've had some great guests on in the past that we talked about reimagining schools, Chris. Tonight's conversation is going to be just about that. I mean, we got to move the needle in a direction that's going to allow us to be able to make our schools better learning places for everybody.
Absolutely right. And what better time than to do it right now, right? We've got a tremendous opportunity to shift and reimagine education. We've been talking about that now for several months, Dean.
Yeah.
And the catalyst, unfortunately, is, this pandemic that we're in. But the fortunate piece to this is we get to connect with guests like Eric and talk about how it's being done in other places, giving us ideas to help our educators locally move on forward. What do you say we kick it off and get our guest in here, man?
Let's bring him in. I'm going to bring Eric in. Why don't you do the honors of giving the bio, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great. Well, hey, everybody. Eric Sheninger is a career educator. He started out as a science teacher at Watchung Hills Regional High School, where he taught several subjects. He's been a coach. He's been a mentor. He's been a director and supervisor. Most importantly, though, he is an influencer. As an associate partner with the International Center for Leadership and Education, he's had the opportunity to lead multiple professional development experiences, engage educators across the globe in rethinking and reimagining how they should be approaching teaching and learning. And he's an author of several books. I want to get those names out there for our listeners so that way we can go ahead and understand a little bit about the scope and breadth of Eric's influence. Learning Transformed, 8 Keys for Designing Tomorrow's Schools Today. Branded, Tell Your Story, Build Relationships and Empower Learning. Uncommon Learning, Creating Schools That Work for Kids. Digital Leadership, Changing Paradigms for Changing Times. Communicating and Connecting with Social Media, Essentials for Principals. and what principals need to know about teaching and learning science. Eric is an award-winning educator. He's had a number of professional organizations recognize his leadership and excellence in education, and he's been a contributing poster to Huffington Post. He sits on the advisory board for many innovative companies and was named the NSBA 20 to Watch list back in 2010 for technology leadership. Could go on, but Eric, it's Sunday night. We talked with you a while ago about your day of painting. We want to get into the conversation with you. Welcome, and how are you tonight?
Thanks for having me, guys. And I'm glad you cut my bio off, because the irony here is before we started doing some amazing things, my bio was one sentence. And everything that I've accomplished has been a team effort. But great to be here this evening.
Eric, we're really fortunate to have you, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. So why don't we dig right into this, because I think it's important for the audience to hear what's going on out there. The landscape has changed in schools, okay? It really has, and digital leadership has become like a buzzword for all of us in administration right now to be able to try to understand and unwrap. What does that look like through your lens? I mean, through the book that you had written.
Yeah, and I think if we look at it this way, leadership is leadership. It hasn't really changed. We can go back and look at world-class leaders throughout time, and they exhibited the same qualities that great leaders do today. The whole digital piece is trying to develop that mindset as to how technology can support and enhance those attributes of effective leadership that we want, not just ourselves to embody, but those who we work with. And, it's been interesting because, I was one of those people that had my head in the sand. I didn't believe in any of this. I swore I would never be on social media. And then I had my epiphany back in 2009, and the rest is history. But we still have many people, whether it's fear or comfort, that haven't really embraced the power of digital leadership. And it's not about using technology per se. It really is about, it mentions some things, expanding our influence, meeting our stakeholders where they are, amplifying our great work, being able to provide timely feedback. I mean, and I can go on and on again. But with COVID-19, it really has put a lot of leaders under the microscope. And now it's really time to spread our wings and lead schools and organizations into this new world that we are in.
Man, Eric, as I'm listening to you talk, it's not necessarily about, leading in a new environment. It's about leading with effective practices and subtly shifting your delivery and the way that you're connecting, with your charges. So as I'm sitting here listening, I'm wondering, while we're in a moment based on a catalyst, with the pandemic, and we've got an opportunity to transform and reshape how we're delivering and how we're engaging, with our stakeholders. How sustainable is that change down the road? How can we go ahead and maintain momentum as the pendulum shifts back to, and I say normal in quotes, because the old normal is definitely not going to exist. But how do we lead sustainable change in this environment and guarantee that our stakeholders understand that we won't shift back to those former practices that'll become antiquated?
Yeah, and I think when we look at sustainability, I mean, that is the hallmark of great leadership. I remember advice I was given when I became a principal was, when you leave, the changes that you've ushered in should remain in place. And, we always, there's so many, fads and, you could say moments, especially with social media. And, there's so many great things that are happening. But when it's all said and done, we want to make sure that our time, our effort, our finances, budget, that it actually leads to something that's going to leave a lasting impact. And in our case, this is really how do we improve learning for our kids? Before the pandemic, we to a sense, we're all blinded by our own bias. We just are. And, many of us fall victim, I did when I was a principal, to the most dangerous phrase in education. That's the way we've always done it. And I think now we have to really, COVID-19, for all the challenges it has placed on schools, we have seen teachers and administrators rise to the occasion and truly innovate, even if it was forced. We've seen some shifts that are gaining momentum that we can only hope will remain in place, because one of my biggest fears is that we will go back to the way that things were always done. But when we think about that sustainability, people need to see value. We need to make sure that we're providing feedback and positive reinforcement along the way. We also have to make sure that there is evidence, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, that what we are doing is actually making a difference. And it doesn't have to be about data, but you could paint a story. We can use video, we can use images. Everyone knows the why. It gets people pumped up. People laugh, they cry, great. Well, the why's been smacking us in the face for decades now. People want the how, and the sustainability is grounded in the how, the practical nature, where people can truly believe, you know what? This isn't that hard. This is improving learning for our kids. This is improving the culture for our teachers. And, I think the more we can focus on that how and show people and pump them up, then sustainability will follow. But, it doesn't come from leaders that tell people what to do. Leadership is about taking people where they need to be. Model, model, model. Don't ask others what to do, what you're not willing to do yourself or have not done yourself. And I can talk and talk and talk, so I'm going to stop there.
No, I love that you're saying that, because my mind goes back to what you said earlier, Eric, about leadership is leadership, and that doesn't change. The pillars of leadership for good schools and successful schools remain the same. The tools by which they choose to grow and to move into a future element, now that's the difference maker. Okay, when we start talking about digital leadership and digital literacy and things of that nature, we talk about future ready schools. What are we looking at? What is the biggest transformative change when we go from what we've known? I sit as a principal sometimes having conversations with faculty members who are, you said it best, we're used to what we used to do. I mean, we're really good at what we used to do. That's the way it's always been. But when we get that growth mindset implanted and change begins to show, we become a step closer to future readiness. What does that mean from your lens within the book that you wrote?
Well, and I even think now we got to take it a step further. We need to future-proof our schools. And future-proofing is, how do we give our learners what they need? No matter what's thrown at them, they will be ready for this, whatever, the great unknown we've seen. And I think when we look at what we can do as teachers and as leaders is empower our kids to think. If we can empower our kids to think and apply their thinking in relevant and meaningful ways, that will serve them well into the future and right now, because we're seeing that now. We have experienced this sort of, cataclysmic event. And as much as it has, I guess, really put some of us in a state of constant fear, confusion, it really has given us more clarity in terms of what our purpose is. And our purpose is not necessarily to deliver a curriculum or to teach per se, but to create an environment where we have those empowered learners that can think. When you put it in a nutshell, it's not about preparing kids for something. We need to prepare our kids for anything. Mm-hmm. And as we do that, we have to really look at our practice. And that future proofing is, when kids are faced with perplexing unknowns, they can go to a toolbox of strategies because they're competent learners. And I think that's another big shift. We always hear so much about skills. Well, these kids need to have these skills. Well, you can be skilled at throwing a baseball, but totally incompetent as to how to play the game.
Yep.
And I think that's another big shift as we look at our why and our purpose is how do we develop competencies for our learners? And those competencies are new. Well, they're new in terms of our kids now need to be remote collaborators. They do. They need to be able to self-regulate, manage their time. They need to demonstrate emotional intelligence, creativity, problem solving. All that stuff is still there. But we have to change the way in which we, I don't want to say run our schools, but develop culture. And what that can be, to come back full circle to your question is we need to focus on the what ifs instead of getting dragged down by the yeah buts. And the yeah buts, yeah, but not enough time. Yeah, but COVID-19. Yeah, but not enough money. Well, we're always going to have yeah buts, but we need to really focus on the what if, because that really is about moving towards a growth mindset.
Chris, before you go, I love the what if, Eric. I think that's vitally important. You sometimes have a lot of educators that get stuck in the rut of understanding state standards and state testing and things of that nature. That's a whole story, okay? We're talking about the process by which kids can learn. And if we look at it through that lens, those other things take care of itself. What we're doing is, it sounds like we're empowering kids. And I would love to see what happens to a group of students under a study if you empower them to that level, what the learning would look like. How different would it be, the vision of school through the eyes of kids? If you think about it, all of a sudden, that's a game changer. That changes the whole trajectory of learning.
And we've seen where those kids are really immersed in high agency practices.
Yeah.
Prior to the pandemic, personalization. Personalization is not putting all kids on a device and having them use an adaptive learning tool at the same time. Personalization is moving from the what we teach, what's in the curriculum, what's on the test, to who, to emphasize ownership of learning. And the way we do that is through blended pedagogies. Where kids are using technology to have some sort of control over path, pace, place. But when we think about voice, choice, path, pace, place, those elements, in my opinion, should become sort of threaded throughout our culture if we truly want to create those empowered learners that we just referenced. And the ones that have been able to get, find their groove with remote learning, hybrid models, are those kids who have teachers and administrators that are embracing a more of a holistic, personalized approach.
I love the distinction between personalized and the idea that it's, a one-to-one type of initiative, and I've got to tailor each assignment to each individual child. Albert Einstein, summarized the points that you just made pretty nicely, and I think we all agree. Education is not about the learning of facts. It's training the minds to think. And if we talk about utilizing project-based or problem-based learning, we talk about personalized learning. We talk about application of skills. We really want to lead our kids down that path. Now, that requires some innovative thinking on the educator's side to release control, take risks, and delve into some significant unknown, because it's really easy to rely on page 78 of the science textbook, right? As opposed to generate your wonder questions, kids. What do you want to know about the topics on page 87? And go ahead and develop a research project around your wonders, and let them go. How can we design and develop effective professional development experiences to allow teachers to feel that risk taking is okay and go off script and break the norm?
Yeah, man. And before I talk about the professional learning construct, this is really on the shoulders of leaders and how leaders give permission, provide autonomy, targeted feedback that really teachers find value in. And, teachers want to be supported, but if they know that their administrators don't truly value it or have no idea what they're looking at or what they're talking about, then some of them will not change. But some of them also then, get into a rut if they feel that their their leader doesn't really understand what they're trying to accomplish. So, I think as leaders, we need to be scholars. We need to, be able to sort of put ourselves in their shoes. And we think about that empathy. We want empathy for our kids, but we got to show empathy for our teachers. If we're asking them to do these things, then we must have some sort of knowledge base, whether that's, teaching a class, getting our own professional learning. But, I think it really starts with the leader. But when we think about professional learning, time and time again, we've seen, especially in the United States, our infatuation for one and done, drive by, let's bring in a keynote and have a few breakout sessions, and then shocker, nothing really changes. Now, there's some really good keynoters out there. I give my fair share of keynotes, but I will tell you right now, that does not change anything at the system level, because teachers and administrators need job-embedded, ongoing support that replicates the environment where teachers teach and leaders lead. And we need to get that right. Maybe it might cost a little bit more, whether money or time. But the research has shown over and over again, especially looking at the work of Linda Darling-Hammond out of Stanford, is that's the type of learning that gets results. Also, teachers want their administrators to learn with them. I mean, there's nothing worse than if all the teachers are in a mandated professional learning session and the administrators are absent. Now, listen, I'm speaking now as a principal. So I think those things, and I think also the last thing with professional learning is there has to be accountability for growth. Now, not I got you accountability, but accountability for growth. Whether you're using portfolios, turnkeying it, showing artifacts after it's been implemented, but those things have to go into professional learning. But in turn, if they do, that will empower teachers.
Eric, let's take it one step further. 100 years ago, 25 kids in a classroom, desks all in a row, teacher standing in front, chalkboard in front, okay? All of a sudden now we're looking at changing the viewpoint and the transformation of learning spaces. How important is it that we begin to deconstruct what we used to know as the general classroom and make it into a learning zone for kids to empower them to move at their own pace? Whether it's having a one-to-one device, whether it's personalized or blended learning, whatever we're talking about right here, how important is that change? And do you know of any schools that have really kind of just blew that whole process up and made their school into a brand new thought?
Yeah, and I'm going to be a little bit of a downer here as I address the question from the current lens. Is all the progress that was made in learning space redesign came to a halt because of social distancing. And that's no one's fault.
Yeah, that's true.
So here's the thing, and I'll talk about physical spaces in a minute, but we have a golden opportunity now to transform the virtual space for our kids. Because right now, many kids, we can see it over and over again, that kids are not engaged in online spaces, that online environment. So what do we need to do? Just like in a physical classroom is we got to teach in chunks, 10, 15 minutes tops, get kids moving, get them in an activity, have brain breaks, integrate movement, then move to right now asynchronous tasks where kids are really working in blended models such as station rotation, choice boards, playlists. When we think about the physical space, research has shown that classroom design can impact learning by as much as 25%. Furniture, layout, color, acoustics, lighting. So we need to ask ourselves, would we want to learn in those same spaces as our kids? Would we want to learn under the same conditions as those who we are teaching, whether it's physical or online? Because if we would not, then shame on us for not working to change. Now, to answer your question, yes, before the pandemic, there were some school districts doing amazing things with learning environment redesign. Davis Schools in Utah And here in my home district, Cypress Fairbanks, but I'll give a special call out to Wells Elementary School. Not only do they have probably some of the best pedagogically sound blended learning in the country, but they have embraced that flexible seat. Every classroom is a flexible learning space.
Eric, I just saw a comment pop up from Connie Hamilton. Unfortunately, many educators were not prepared for distance learning. I think a lot of districts made an assumption that preparation for distance learning was focused on teaching remotely and not necessarily shifting the mindset about instructional planning and instructional delivery and learning goals and how we can go ahead and assess those. As we think about, your mention of, the asynchronous learning time embedded into a lesson, I think that's fantastic, because as we sit down and look at our current situation and we transition into the new normal, we want to build in something that we're going to be able to capitalize on. If we've got 80% of our kids who are actively engaged in the environment, whether it be hybrid or remote right now, and we only focus on the 10 to 15% who are struggling in this environment, we're doing a disservice to a massive population, right? So thinking about how we can transition those instructional practices in is going to be a real important focus for us. So kudos to you for your mindset around sharing, the experiences that you've had, and also calling, the light to the really good practices that are out there. I do think that as we sit down and as educators and we think about the days that we're in now, and we sit down and look at the connectivity and the fact that the black box that we used to teach in back in the late 90s and early 2000s is no longer a secret. How can we capitalize on social media? How can we maximize our professional learning networks to encourage growth? And assume that the principal is out there in front modeling this. How do we really leverage that that power of PLNs outside?
Yeah, and I'm going to try to piggyback on some of the comments from Connie as well and weave that into my response. First off, we don't know what we don't know. And there's a quote attributed to over 100 different people. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And, to Connie's comment about how we were not prepared for distance learning, we weren't. And that's no one's fault. But then we did have a decision to make, is were we going to provide support to our teachers and administrators so that we could get it right? And right means we have kids that are engaged. We have kids that are logging on. And what we've seen here, we see headline after headline because the media loves negativity, but we have seen through the lens of social media so many amazing practices. Work smarter, not harder. Don't reinvent the wheel. That's what having a personal learning network is all about. And as we talk about how we might not have been prepared for this remote or hybrid world, there are educators that are sharing successful practices that anyone can scoop up. Yep. And it's all about not finding the time, but making the time to be in that space. If people search me, and I love Pinterest, but you'll see I got a whole board on remote and hybrid strategies, all based from the schools that I'm working in currently. So, I think that the whole concept of personal learning network is, we don't want to put ourselves in a silo. And no matter who you are, no matter what your position is, you don't have to have all the answers, because you never will. And I think two of the most powerful sort of phrases that we could say, or reflections, is I need help and I don't know. And with a personal learning network, the I need help and I don't know, you can have thousands and thousands and thousands of people there all over the world that are specific to your position, that are there willing to help you. A human-generated search engine. Resources, ideas, strategies, get questions asked, ask your own questions. It just really is such a resource that all of us probably wish we had when we start our careers, whether it's in the classroom or as leaders, because it's kind of like a warm blanket. A personal learning network is like a warm blanket. It's there to keep you safe, to provide that reassurance that you're not alone, and to pick you up when you feel down.
Eric, I'm so glad you said that. And, I think often from where I sit in my school as an instructional leader, there are certain staff members who are afraid of getting involved with social media. And sometimes I say to myself, what's the rationale for being afraid? Is it afraid of losing what you're in control of because you see something else out? You have to change who you are. But there's the mindset sometimes from educators who have been in the game a long time, it's very difficult for them to embrace the change and get involved. I look at Unlock the Middle. Chris and I started this back in July. We've had 80 people on right now, and every time we speak to somebody, we leave with 10 new ideas. And that is the reason why we do this, and to give back to people who are watching. But I often worry about educators sometimes that get caught up, and they're afraid to get involved with this, whether it be time or just uncertainty. What would you say to staff members, like if you were the principal of a building, that it's okay to get involved? Would you say follow one or two people? What would be your advice?
Well, first, I want to make sure that I'm modeling it and, inviting people into chats, to connect, to share. Then, it really is, my sort of words of wisdom is it's not how many people that follow you that matters. It's the quality of the people that you follow that's going to help you get better. And, I always say, I always shy away from saying you must follow these people, because to me, that might not meet their needs. My job is to help them. If you're a first grade teacher, let's find some first grade, rock stars that you can follow that can help you get better. And I think that whole personal part of personal learning network is so important. Is we really want people to own it by pointing them in the right direction so that they can connect with those people that will give them the most bang for their buck, which is their time.
I love that. And one more thing I want to touch upon, if we could, the pillars of digital leadership. Okay. And I'm going to step back for a second because I think this is right in your wheelhouse. What would your ideas be around those pillars if we're looking at it from an administrator's mindset?
Well, I mean, when I started to change from my very fixed mindset, the key, and this comes back to sustainability, is I saw value in the changes to my practice. And that's why I stuck with it. And I saw the pillars as the foundational elements of every school culture. When you look at pillar number 1, student learning, engagement, and outcomes, well, every school should be focused. Every district should be focused on that. When we think about learning in environments and spaces, every school should be focused on that. So it clicked for me when I saw this as not just another thing we had to do. That's another sort of roadblock to sustainability, is if people say, oh, the flavor of the month, or they're starting, oh, this too shall pass. Let's see how many things we can throw up on the wall, what will stick. And the pillars represent the work that teachers, building administrators, district leaders are doing all the time. And it's a pretty simple equation. Improve the work, share the work, celebrate the work. And that's really what it is. It's not that we're doing a poor job, but we can always improve. There is no perfection in education. There's no perfect teacher, school, administrator, district, state does not exist. But there is the opportunity in our profession to get better every single day. And that's what the pillars represent. No fluff, no, sort of ambiguity. This is what we do every single day. How will you innovate? How will you lead change in your classroom, your school, your district? How will you know how well you did? How will you empower others to be part of the process, to build capacity? How will you bring your stakeholders in? And that's really what it's really focused on, is the how, which leads to the what, which is improved outcomes for kids, for adults, for our communities.
Love the idea of the pillars being able to be applied in any setting to really take away from that the flavor of the month PD, or the flavor of the month initiative, or the pendulum swing. I think you really did summarize a heck of a lot in terms of smart thinking and smart approach, Eric, into, sustainability with effective practices and continuous evolution of those. Thanks a ton for the time tonight. We are looking at 35 minutes, which is right in our wheelhouse of summary time. But I think you gave us an awful lot of opportunity to rethink a little bit about how this environment really does relate back to the old normal, and allows us to really hone in on our leadership skills with all of our stakeholders that are out there. So everybody, Eric Sheninger, really provided us some great information tonight, not only about digital literacy, but about leadership in general. Dean and I are truly appreciative of the time. Be sure to check Eric's books out. I'm sure they're available on Amazon and anywhere that books are sold, but any one of the titles by Eric is out there. They'll be up on our website. Please be sure to check us out. Unlocking the Middle. We are Unlock the Middle on Twitter, on Facebook. We are streaming all the time on Periscope, and our archives are available up on YouTube as well. Dean, Eric, thanks so much for being here on a Sunday evening. Eric, you got some painting to get back to and take care of your business at home. Dean, why don't you wrap us up and send us home tonight?
Hey, absolutely, Eric. Thank you again so much for all you guys listening out there. Unlock the Middle is all about giving back, and tonight we did just that. Eric, we want to say thank you very much. We hope you all stay well, be healthy, and hey, Tuesday night, Chris, Middle Marvel. Another Middle Marvel coming from New York, another one coming in. So we got a lot going on here at Unlocking the Middle, and it's all about making sure that we provide a platform for people to get better each and every day, in which we did tonight. Eric, again, thank you so much for your time. On behalf of Eric and Chris, we wish you all a very good night. Take care and be well, everybody.